There are moments in Roman history when reason itself seems to falter, when the cold arithmetic of war is overturned by audacity, precision, and the iron will of disciplined men. One such moment unfolded in the rugged highlands of Armenia, where a single Roman legion stood against an empire. What happened that day would echo across centuries, whispered as both legend and lesson, proof that strategy and nerve could eclipse even overwhelming might. This is the story of Lucullus and the Battle of Tigranocerta, one of the strangest, boldest, and most improbable victories ever won beneath the Roman standard. In 69 BC, as the Third Mithridatic War raged across Asia Minor, the legions of Rome found themselves facing the impossible. Roughly 12,000 Romans, veterans hardened by years of relentless campaigning, were confronted by an enemy said to number over 100,000. Some ancient sources, ever fond of the spectacular, claimed that by the battle's end, only 5 Romans had fallen. Whether that number was boastful exaggeration or not, the outcome was undeniable. The losses on the Armenian side were catastrophic, so vast that the fight itself became a paradox. How could so few prevail against so many? On parchment, the odds looked suicidal. 1 legion, perhaps 2 at most, stood against a kingdom's full might. King Tigranes the Great, ruler of Armenia and master of countless vassals, commanded an army unlike any Lucullus had ever faced, a force of armored cavalrymen whose shining cataphracts could crush infantry by sheer weight, archers who could fill the sky with arrows, and columns of infantry stretching to the horizon. In contrast, Lucullus had barely 13,000 men. And yet, where others saw disaster, he saw opportunity, a flaw hidden in the arrogance of numbers. That single insight would turn madness into mastery. To understand how this moment came to pass, one must look back at the long shadow cast by another man, Mithridates VI of Pontus, one of Rome's most relentless enemies. For decades, Mithridates had dreamed of building an empire that could rival the Republic itself. From the rocky coasts of the Black Sea to the plains of Anatolia, he fought Rome with fire and cunning. His wars were not mere border skirmishes, but crusades of vengeance. In 88 BC, he committed the atrocity that seared his name into Roman memory, the Asiatic Vespers, a coordinated massacre of up to 80,000 Roman and Italian settlers across Asia Minor. It was not just rebellion, it was retribution, and it made him the embodiment of Rome's worst fears, a cultured king who wielded terror like a weapon. Years of conflict followed. Rome answered with overwhelming force. Mithridates was driven from one stronghold after another, hunted by generals like Sulla, and later, Lucullus himself. By 69 BC, his fortunes were shattered, his armies broken. Desperate, he fled north into the mountains of Armenia, seeking refuge in the court of his son-in-law, Tigranes II, the Great King. But Tigranes was no simple host. He ruled one of the most formidable empires the East had ever seen. His dominion stretched from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, from the mountains of Cappadocia to the rivers of Mesopotamia. He had forged an empire out of ambition and brilliance, crowning himself with the ancient Persian title King of Kings, a declaration that he was a ruler not merely among nations, but over them. His palaces gleamed with gold, his court swelled with scholars, merchants, and foreign envoys. He was a monarch who thought an empire. His palaces gleamed with gold, his court swelled with scholars, merchants, and foreign envoys. He was a monarch who thought in empires, not provinces. And as if to embody that grandeur, he founded a new capital, Tigranocerta. Rising in what is now southeastern Turkey, it was conceived as a monument to his glory, a city meant to outshine all others. Theaters, marketplaces, marble halls, all rose from the dust, funded by conquest and filled with treasures taken from across the East. But this beauty came at a cost. To populate his gleaming city, Tigranes forcibly uprooted entire communities from conquered lands, men and women from Cappadocia, Cilicia, and Mesopotamia and resettled them within its walls. Beneath its polished veneer, Tigranocerta was a city of captives. Its people bowed to the king's will, but their loyalty was shallow, born of fear rather than faith. Lucullus saw through that illusion. He understood that the city was not merely a fortress or a prize. It was the very heart of Tigranes' pride, the keystone of his authority. If it fell, his aura of divine kingship would shatter, and the empire he ruled through fear would crumble around him. When Lucullus demanded that Tigranes surrender Mithridates, the Armenian king's pride flared into fury. To betray his father-in-law would be to admit weakness before Rome, an act unthinkable for a ruler who called himself King of Kings. His refusal sealed his fate. Lucullus did not wait. Where other commanders might have fortified, stalled, or sought reinforcements, he gambled everything. With astonishing boldness, he marched straight across the Euphrates River, plunging deep into Armenian territory. His army was small, perhaps 16,000 men at most, but they were elite. Veterans of years of warfare, disciplined and utterly loyal. Plutarch writes that he had about 16,000 heavy infantry and 1,000 cavalry, though modern scholars suggest perhaps a total of 15,000, supported by a few thousand auxiliaries. It was not a great army. It was a blade, sharp, focused, and deadly in the hands of a man who knew how to strike. Lucullus moved with frightening speed. His columns advanced across rugged country, capturing small fortresses and towns with surgical precision. Each one was a lifeline of Tigranes' supply network, a link in the chain of his empire. By snapping them one by one, Lucullus didn't just seize ground. He severed communication and spread confusion. Reports of Roman movements raced across the land, but they contradicted one another. Some claimed Lucullus was still at the Euphrates, others that he was already outside Tigranocerta. The fog of war began to settle, and panic crept into the Armenian court. When word finally reached Tigranes, he was far away, occupied with quelling revolts among his western vassals in Syria, uprisings that had already tested the limits of his empire. The moment he learned of Lucullus' advance, fury overcame him. He sent riders racing in every direction, commanding his satraps and client kings to raise their levies and march at once. Within weeks, the plains around his camp teemed with men and horses, banners rippling like waves in a storm. Ancient chroniclers, especially Plutarch, describe an army of mythic proportions: 20,000 archers and slingers, 55,000 cavalry, of which 17,000 were heavy cataphracts encased in iron, and 150,000 infantry, not counting the mass of servants, attendants, and supply bearers who followed in their wake. Together, they may have numbered more than 200,000 souls. Whether these numbers are fact or poetic flourish hardly matters. What matters is that it was a force so vast it seemed to embody the very arrogance of empire, and yet, within it lay the seed of defeat. Lucullus, calm and calculating, had seen it from the start. The bigger the beast, the slower it moves. And soon, he would strike it where it was weakest, not in strength but in pride. Modern historians, careful to strip away the exaggerations of ancient writers, believe that Tigranes' army likely numbered between 70 and 100,000 fighting men, still a vast and terrifying host by any measure. Even at the lowest estimate, Lucullus' 12 to 15,000 Romans were outnumbered 5-1. But Lucullus had long since learned that numbers alone do not win battles. He trusted something far deadlier: the unbreakable rhythm of a Roman legion in motion, the drilled precision of men who had learned to fight as one body, one heartbeat. Where others saw a doomed army, he saw a blade, sharp, small, but perfectly balanced. Lucullus gambled that speed, timing, and discipline could unmake even an empire. If he advanced fast enough, forced Tigranes to react instead of plan, and struck before the Armenian war machine could fully form, the odds might bend in his favor. So he moved like a shadow across the hills, seizing the high ground near Tigranocerta before the enemy could finish gathering. It was a move born of nerve and genius. The high ridges offered him not only visibility, but leverage, letting his compact legions descend like a hammer from the heights. He tightened his grip around the city, encircling it but not attacking outright. To the impatient, it may have looked like hesitation, but Lucullus was waiting for Tigranes' pride to pull him into the open. He knew that the Armenian king could not allow his glittering capital to remain under siege for long. Tigranocerta was more than a city. It was a monument to his ego, the jewel of his empire, and a symbol of his claim to kingship. To let it be threatened was to admit weakness, and for a man who called himself King of Kings, that was unthinkable. The Roman commander also knew something else, that this splendid capital was hollow at its core. Its walls were unfinished, its towers still half-built, its population restless and divided. The city's inhabitants were not native Armenians bound by loyalty, but thousands of displaced peoples, Greeks, Cappadocians, Cilicians, and Mesopotamians, forced to live here by royal decree. Beneath the polished marble and rising walls simmered quiet resentment. Some of those same unwilling settlers would later open gates and reveal secrets to the invaders. So Lucullus waited, and the noose slowly tightened. Smoke rose from Roman campfires on the hills. Dust from their patrols drifted across the plains. Inside the city, rumor turned to fear. And somewhere in the mountains to the west, Tigranes was still trying to stamp out rebellion among his Syrian vassals when a message reached him. The Romans are here. To any ordinary ruler, it would have been a call for caution. But Tigranes was no ordinary ruler. His power was built on grandeur, a performance of divine kingship that demanded he always act like a god of war. To delay was to invite doubt. To hesitate was to appear mortal. His nobles expected him to lead from the front. His client kings watched for any sign of frailty. Even the faintest whisper that the King of Kings feared a single Roman legion could unravel his authority. So he answered not with diplomacy, but with thunder. Messengers rode out from his court in every direction, banners unfurled, seals stamped with gold. Across the plains of Mesopotamia and the highlands of Armenia, local lords and vassals were commanded to send every man fit to carry a sword. Within weeks, the countryside stirred like a hive. Caravans of troops streamed toward Tigranes' camp. Cavalry from the steppes, archers from the mountains, mercenaries from the cities of the east. What gathered before him was an army that defied imagination. Ancient chroniclers claimed hundreds of thousands. Even if the truth was less, the sight itself was overwhelming, a living tide of men, steel, and banners. At its core was the weapon Tigranes trusted above all, the cataphract cavalry, the pride of the Armenian host. These were not mere horsemen, they were armored beasts forged in iron. Each man and horse was encased in overlapping scales of bronze or steel, sewn on a leather, leaving no part exposed. Helmets reduced their faces to narrow slits of darkness. The weight of their armor, 40 kilograms or more, made them slow to maneuver, but unstoppable once in motion. Their long lances, the contis, were designed for one purpose: to smash through any line of infantry unfortunate enough to stand in their path. When they gathered for the charge, the earth itself seemed to shudder. Thousands of hooves drummed in unison, metal clanged against metal, and sunlight flashed across a sea of bronze scales. To Roman eyes, it must have looked like a wall of living thunder rolling toward them, an army not of men, but of machines built to kill. Behind this terrifying cavalry came the mass of Tigranes' empire, lines upon lines of infantry, archers, spearmen, slingers, and light skirmishers drawn from every conquered land. Some were trained professionals. Many were levies barely acquainted with war. Yet sheer numbers gave them power. Baggage trains trailed for miles, choked with supplies and servants. Clouds of horse archers patrolled the edges like circling hawks. The Roman camp, by contrast, was small, quiet, disciplined. There were no endless ranks, no dazzling armor, only the calm hum of organization. The men of Lucullus' legions were veterans who had marched across deserts and rivers, fought in storms, built fortified camps every night before sleeping. They knew their commander's habits, his sharp eye for ground, his patience, his refusal to be baited. They were men who had bled with him for years and trusted that he would not lead them to ruin. Each soldier's pilum, the heavy throwing javelin, was cleaned and ready. Each gladius, the short sword of Rome, was sharpened for the close press of combat. Their shields were polished not for show, but for reflection, to blind the enemy under sunlight, to turn the battlefield itself into a weapon. These were not just fighters. They were craftsmen of death, artisans of formation warfare. And across the plains below, the horizon began to move. From a distance, the Armenian host looked like the tide of a rising sea, glints of metal flashing like ripples under the sun. Drums and horns echoed across the valley, deep and rhythmic, as though the mountain itself was breathing. When the first ranks came into view, the Roman lines held firm, silent. In the midst of that immense army rode Tigranes II, wrapped in purple and gold, surrounded by cataphracts like a human fortress. His generals, many of the men who had fought and bled for him, begged him to avoid battle. They urged patience. Let the Romans rot beneath the walls. Let hunger and exhaustion do the work. Trap them, starve them, bury them in time. But pride is the poison of kings. Tigranes laughed at their caution. To him, the Roman force was a mockery, a handful of intruders defying a world power. When scouts returned with reports that Lucullus commanded only a few legions, he dismissed it as absurd. The story goes that he turned to his advisors and said, "They are too many to be ambassadors and too few to be an army." He saw the Romans not as enemies, but as an opportunity, a spectacle, a message to the east that defiance of Armenia led only to humiliation. He planned not merely to defeat Lucullus, but to annihilate him, to scatter his bones across the plains for all kings to see. And so, beneath the burning autumn sun of 69 BC, the stage was set. On one side, a mountain ridge crowned with Roman discipline. On the other, a rolling empire of gold and iron, commanded by pride. The world would soon learn which was stronger. October 6th, 69 BC. The morning air above the plains of Tigranocerta shimmered with dust and tension. Two armies, one vast as the horizon, the other small enough to be counted by banners, finally stood face to face outside the unfinished walls of the Armenian capital. The Armenian host, spread wide across the high ground, seemed to blot out the earth. From the ridges above, their archers and cavalry looked down upon the Romans like hunters upon prey. It was by all logic the perfect field for Tigranes, open, elevated, commanding. The very kind of terrain where Rome had no business fighting. At the center of the Armenian line, where the slope leveled into the valley floor, Tigranes placed his pride, the cataphracts, armored cavalry glittering under the sun. Their lances pointed forward, their armor flashing like a river of bronze. To the untrained eye, it looked like invincibility itself. Once unleashed, their sheer weight and momentum could tear through any infantry formation alive. But Lucullus saw what others could not. He understood that a head-on clash here would mean annihilation. If he allowed those iron beasts to charge downhill into his lines, the impact alone would shatter the Roman center. Yet Lucullus was no fool. He would not play by his enemy's script. He would write his own. He left Lucius Murena in command of roughly 6,000 men, just enough to hold the Armenians' gaze. Their orders were simple but deadly. Maintain formation, draw attention, give no sign of weakness. Meanwhile, Lucullus himself gathered a much smaller detachment, only 2 cohorts, barely a few thousand soldiers, and vanished from sight. Using the folds of the landscape, gullies, and the dips of dry riverbeds, he began a wide flanking march around Tigranes' right. Step by step, shield by shield, the Romans slipped away, not toward retreat, but toward revelation. Their goal was a rise of low hills behind the Armenian line, a point from which Lucullus could strike at the heart of the enemy's army, not its edge. From there, he could bring chaos to the one thing Tigranes' war machine could not function without: its camp. At first, the Armenians laughed. To Tigranes and his nobles, it looked as though the Romans were fleeing. Why else would such a small group peel away from the front lines? Officers chuckled, soldiers jeered, and even the king, drunk on confidence, dismissed the maneuver as cowardice. "They're running," he is said to have told his men. "The battle is already won." That laughter would soon die, because what looked like a retreat was, in truth, a masterpiece of deception. Every moment of Lucullus' movement was a risk measured in seconds. His men marched fast, heads low, their armor muffled with cloth, shields held close to avoid glints of light. If even one Armenian scout spotted them too early, the entire maneuver could collapse. Thousands of cataphracts could swing around and crush the detachment before it struck. Finally, Lucullus reached the crest. From the top, the entire Armenian camp sprawled beneath him, a living city of tents, wagons, animals, traders, and servants. Smoke from cooking fires curled into the air. Merchants bartered in the distance, soldiers polished armor, and slaves carried water to the horses. It was an ocean of life, sprawling and disorganized, the hidden soft belly of the Armenian host. Lucullus studied it in silence. To his eyes, this was no fortress. It was chaos waiting for a spark. He turned to his men, calm and deliberate, and pointed down toward the sea of tents. "This," he said quietly, "is where we win." The soldiers understood. Their task was not to attack the main army, not to clash with the iron cavalry that waited in formation, but to strike the heart behind it. By torching the camp, they could unleash something no army, no matter how mighty, could withstand: panic. When Lucullus gave the signal, a roar rose across the hillside. The Roman cohorts charged down like thunder, their armor flashing in the light. The attack was sudden, silent no longer, a storm of shields and swords crashing into the camp's outer ring. What followed was instant chaos. Camp followers screamed and scattered. Traders dropped their wares. Servants bolted for safety. The stampede tore through tents and wagons, crashing directly into the rear of Tigranes' army. In a matter of minutes, order dissolved into madness. Soldiers turned at the noise behind them, unsure whether the attack came from their own allies or some new Roman ambush. The confusion was catastrophic. Officers shouted orders no one heard. Banners fell. Horses reared. The great Armenian formation, proud, precise, perfect, began to twist in upon itself. From his command post, Tigranes watched in disbelief as smoke and dust rose behind his lines. Lucullus' plan was unfolding exactly as intended. At that moment, Mithridatic saw his cue. From the front, he drove his legions forward with a single, unified push, shields locked, pilar raised, marching with the mechanical precision that defined the Roman art of war. They advanced uphill into the disoriented Armenian infantry, who were already glancing backward at the chaos behind them. Trapped between fire and iron, Tigranes' army collapsed. The cataphracts, those armored titans, could not maneuver in the tight crush of bodies. Their strength was in the charge, not the melee. With wagons, servants, and broken soldiers blocking the plain, their horses stumbled and fell. Once bogged down, even the proudest cavalrymen became targets for the disciplined Roman infantry. Legionaries thrust short swords through the joints of armor, stabbed at horses' bellies, and ripped through confusion with brutal efficiency. The mighty army that had filled the horizon was now a maelstrom of terror. What had begun as a formation of kings became a mob. Soldiers trampled one another, throwing down shields to run faster. The cries of the dying were drowned by the thunder of their own retreat. And then the unthinkable Tigranes fled. The man who had mocked Lucullus as too few to be an army now threw away his own royal crown in the dust and rode for his life. Without their king, the Armenians were broke entirely. Commanders fled, lines shattered, and what was once a battle became a massacre. Ancient Roman sources, ever proud of their empire, claimed over 100,000 Armenians died on that field, while Rome lost barely a handful. Some said 5 men, others said not even that. The truth, of course, is less exact, but the outcome was the same, a total, unrelenting rout. Lucullus, calm amid the slaughter, gave no order to pursue recklessly. His victory had already been won not by strength, but by strategy. By using the enemy's size, terrain, and arrogance against them, he had achieved one of the most improbable triumphs in Roman history. When the battle smoke cleared, he marched straight to Tigranocerta. The gates opened without resistance. The garrison had fled. The city's settlers, weary and disillusioned, welcomed him as a liberator. Roman soldiers poured into the city, seizing its immense treasure, gold, jewels, silks, and coin beyond measure. Yet, remarkably, Lucullus spared the civilians. He allowed the Greeks and others who had been relocated there to return home. In victory, he showed not cruelty, but calculation, the kind that wins hearts as easily as it breaks armies. When word of the victory reached Rome, disbelief spread through the Republic. One legion against an empire victorious. Lucullus became a hero, his name spoken with awe, his battles studied by generals for generations. Though history would later shift its spotlight to men like Pompey the Great or Julius Caesar, none could ignore what Lucullus had done that day. The Battle of Tigranocerta was more than a triumph. It was a lesson carved into stone, a testament to intellect over impulse, to precision over pride. Tigranes' empire fractured. Subject kingdoms broke away. The Parthians encroached from the east, and Armenia's dream of domination burned out as quickly as its capital had blazed. Lucullus' later years were quiet. He returned to Rome, celebrated, honored, and then retired from war. Ironically, the man who had conquered kings became known not for conquest, but for refinement, for gardens, philosophy, and feasts that drew the envy of senators. Yet in the annals of strategy, his victory at Tigranocerta remained immortal. Because on that day, in the shadow of the Armenian mountains, Lucullus proved a truth as old as war itself. That courage without intellect is ruin, and that the sharpest sword is the mind of the commander who knows when to strike.